Alright, welcome back. In today's video we're going to be looking around the land we're planting 60,000 trees on this winter and the preparation work that we're currently doing. So yeah, as a reminder, we got our planting application grant now, that's all confirmed, and we're just starting to do the preparation work. Before we can plant the trees, we've got to do some work. And yeah, let's have a look at the mounds. So the mounds are where we're going to be planting each individual tree. And as you can see here, they're flat mounds, so they're called inverted mounds. And this is kind of I think it's kind of a newer thing in forestry to do these flatter mounds. So originally you'd make an actual proper mound with the soil and then you plant the tree in the top of the mound, but the problem with that is it can lead to longer term instability problems, and the other way you could do it is to like plow the site and then to put the trees in the mounds, but then that obviously makes quite an uneven site when you come to managing it in the future. So we're doing these inverted mounds, and then yeah, the tree will go in the middle of here, and there's a digger going around. We'll go and check it out, or maybe I can cut some footage in of the digger at work. Yeah, so it's like one scoop and then pushing the soil back in and then squashing it down with the head of the digger. So this is, as you can see, it's about roughly 2 meter spacing between these mounds. It does vary over the site for different reasons. Some trees are going to be planted closer together, and other areas we need them to be further apart. And the other thing we're doing, which is kind of unusual, is they're not in lines, or not in strict lines anyway. You can probably always see some kind of lines, but that's just because we wanted it to be more like feel more like a natural forest rather than a plantation, which obviously has its kind of advantages because it kind of looks a bit better, but it will make it slightly harder to look after the trees, especially in the early years, because as you can maybe imagine, we've still got sheep on the land at the moment, so that keeps the grass quite short. But next year, when there's no sheep here, because you can't have sheep with the new trees because they'd eat them, the grass will grow longer and other weeds will start growing, and then it can be like harder to see where the trees are, and we need to get in and kind of look after the trees, and if they're in lines it's a lot easier to find them, whereas when it's like all jumbled up like this, it's a bit more work. But I think for the long-term benefit, or medium to long-term benefit, it's probably better. It's kind of nicer not to plant in lines. So the other benefits of mounding, or at least these inverted mounds, is it makes a weed-free area, at least in the near future, so the tree doesn't have to compete with so many kind of established weeds. Obviously into next year, later next year and in the year after, weeds will colonize around the tree and compete with it, but we want to kind of give it as big a head start as we can, and at least it means that the weeds won't be too big, at least next year. The main thing we're worried about is competition with light, so we want to make sure the tree keeps ahead of the weeds, stays higher. The other thing is the soil here is actually, it kind of absorbs the heat more, so it's like a slightly warmer area, potentially, with the frost that we're going to get, which also kind of helps the tree out. The other thing to say is the earlier in the season, so when I say the season I mean from like November onwards, that you can plant the tree, the better it is, because as soon as spring starts the tree can get going straight away, whereas if you're planting into April, you can still plant bare root, which is mostly what we're planting into April kind of time. It's always kind of lost potentially a few weeks of growing time, and you really want to get it established as soon as possible, get the roots going, and kind of, because obviously in the summertime you potentially got a risk of drought, so the better the roots are already, the more likely they're not going to suffer with drought, and also it just gives them a head start over the weeds that are going to start growing. So that's kind of a bit of a summary about why you mounds, very brief kind of summary. So the other thing we've got to do before we plant the trees is put up a deer fence. So at the moment we've got this, what is called a stock proof fence, so this keeps the sheep into their fields, but it won't keep, it doesn't keep deer out, and we need to keep the deer out so they don't eat the young trees, because that's what they love doing. Must be, they're tasty, or at least some types of trees are tasty, so we don't want to lose those. This is the kind of the one problem we've been having, is finding a good timber to use in the fencing. So generally softwoods are used in construction of deer fences, which are kind of easily available, but they tend to only kind of last 15 to 20 years, and because we're trying to do a continuous curve forest, and we're gonna have to keep the deer out a lot longer than that, indefinitely, so we keep getting regeneration within the forest of new trees. So we want something that lasts a lot longer, and there's a couple of options. The best, we think, is to use a timber called Robinia. It doesn't grow in the UK, they grow it in Eastern Europe, although I'm not 100% sure where it's native to, but they definitely grow it there. So we've been trying to source that, but it's been quite challenging. Obviously a lot of people at this time of year are doing fencing, so there's a high demand. So it's kind of delaying our project. We were hoping to have the fence up by the end of October. It's now mid-October, we haven't started. So it's probably meaning we're not going to plant the trees until after Christmas now. So frustrating, but for the long-term benefits, I think we're kind of confident we should wait a little bit longer to have a good fence. So it's quite a long fence. It's going to be 3 kilometers worth. It's going to take the guys who put it up about a month. So that's yeah, quite a big job, shall we say. Anything else to say about the fence? I don't think at the moment, but when they come to put up the fence, obviously we'll come and have a look at how they're doing it, and talk a bit more about how you actually, put up a deer fence. So we're going to be building some tracks in the new forest, and this is to help us manage the forest into the future. Just because without making proper tracks, it's just going to get super muddy if we're constantly taking vehicles over it. And this is the stone that we're going to be using. So this is the quarry, or the old quarry, and we're using it as something called a borrow pit. So that's where we take stone from somewhere on the land and we use it for the tracks on the land. You can't take that stone off the land that we own, otherwise you need a quarrying license, but we can use it within the property that we own. So this, as you can see, work is currently going on, and at the moment they're quarrying the stone, and then next week they're going to be coming and crushing that stone so it's in much smaller pieces, because as you can see it's pretty big blocks at the moment, and we need probably things that kind of fist size and smaller to make a good surface that we can drive on. So yeah, it's obviously changed quite a bit. The feeling of the quarry is going to be quite a bit bigger. I guess maybe the surface area within the quarry will be about 20% bigger. And as you can probably see in the background, there's quite a lot of water in the quarry. So we're going to have to sort the drainage out a bit as well, because we're hoping to use the quarry for storing stuff and potentially some sort of forestry business potentially in the future. So yeah, and the reason we chose this corner was there's a lot of dead ash trees or dying ash trees on this corner. So once we cut those down, we could quarry in that area. Whereas if we'd gone into the other side, we would have been going into the new planting area, and also it was kind of easier to quarry this side. So yeah, it's been this is the first day I've actually come to see the quarrying in action, so it's good to see the progress. The guy driving the digger, he was just saying that it's fairly crumbly, the rock in this corner. Sometimes he's having to use a drill to if it's really solid, but generally you can just use the bucket as he's doing here to kind of claw away at the rock and then pile it up ready for crushing next week. Alright, so I'm in the garden field now, so that's the field we're planting our more unusual conifers. It's a bit more sheltered with the trees here and the lie of the land, the terrain, the slopes. So this is our trackway in the field. So it's following the pylons, just because you can't plant trees within 6 meters of the pylons, so it makes sense to put the trackway and the pylons together. The actual track itself will just be a grass path for probably at least 20 years. So to keep it kind of dry, we've put ditches both sides, which it's quite wet in the bottom of this field, so we don't want it to kind of churn up if we end up driving quite a bit on it. The ditches kind of flow that way, and then the plan is to possibly have a pond at the end of the ditches, just to collect any water. It's also even wetter down that end. As you can see, the Jamie, it's actually in this machine here, and he's digging the mounds in this field. So this is on that side we're getting more western red cedar, which is kind of more tolerant to the wet conditions, and then on the top side generally more like Douglas fir, coastal redwood. So yeah, in the future there could be some massive trees here, but probably beyond our lifetimes till they get to maturity. And yeah, that's the garden field prep going well. And yeah, obviously the fence will need to go up as well. All right, that brings you up to date with the tree planting, how we're progressing. If you're enjoying watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next video.